Chapter 8. The Forest. The morning sun, a pale watery gold, seeped through the dense canopy of pines, painting the forest floor in a shifting mosaic of light and shadow. But the beauty was lost on Emily, Anna, and Zoe. Their home, the familiar wooden structure nestled in a small clearing, felt suddenly fragile behind them, a thin shield against the unease that coiled within their stomachs. Stepping into the woods, the air seemed to thicken, each rustle of leaves and whisper of wind carrying an ominous undertone that prickled their skin. Gone was the usual carefree laughter that often accompanied their excursions into these woods, replaced by a strained, suffocating quiet. Their voices, usually vibrant, emerged as hushed, almost desperate calls. "Jake! Jake! Jake, are you out here?" Emily's usually resonant voice echoed weakly, swallowed whole by the dense trees, absorbed by the ancient silence. A chorus of birdsong answered, but not the beloved, familiar voice they yearned to hear. A cold, tightening knot twisted in Emily's gut. This wasn't like Jake. He never wandered far without telling them, and he certainly never disappeared for this long. Anna, the eldest, glanced nervously into the shadowy undergrowth, her eyes darting between gnarled roots and obscured thickets. Fear, thin and sharp, pricked at the edges of her formidable confidence. "Maybe we should head back," she suggested, her voice barely a whisper. "This feels wrong, terribly wrong." The shadows played tricks with her eyes, transforming familiar shapes into lurking figures. Zoe, the youngest, though only 18 months Emily's junior, shook her head, her youthful energy clashing with the growing tension, a spark of defiance in her amber eyes. "No way. We're not giving up on him. Jake wouldn't give up on us." Her conviction, though born of fierce loyalty, resonated with a desperate hope they all clung to. "She's right," Emily affirmed, pushing past her own rising anxiety. "He's got to be around here. I can feel it." That feeling was more than just a gut instinct. It was a faint, almost imperceptible hum beneath her own skin. A subtle resonance that occasionally surfaced when Jake was in distress or in need of their help. A whisper from their shared, unspoken bond. Their resolve, though shaky, held them firm. They pushed deeper into the woods, their boots crunching on the damp earth, each step resonating with the heavy silence of the forest. The air grew colder, the dappled sunlight thinning as they ventured further into a denser part of the pine forest. "Lirael?" Emily breathed, recognizing the blue one. "Yes," came the gentle voice, soft as wind through leaves. "We have followed you, little light. The woods are shifting. It watches." Seraphine, the crimson-winged butterfly, hovered above Anna's shoulder. "Courage, sister of strength. Your fear clouds your judgment." "I'm not afraid," Anna muttered, though her hands trembled as she adjusted her scarf. Noel, pale and silver, alighted on Zoe's wrist. "The forest listens, Zoe. Speak softly. The air is not yours anymore." Zoe gave a nervous half-smile. "You mean it belongs to Jake?" "No," Noel whispered. "Something far older." A chill ran through all three sisters. The silence of the forest felt less peaceful and more heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very trees held their breath. They called for Jake again, their voices growing hoarser, but only the wind through the pines replied, a mournful sigh. Suddenly, Emily, her gaze fixed on a distant patch of sunlight, stepped off the main path onto a patch of slick, moss-covered rocks near the edge of a narrow, winding stream. Her foot slipped out from under her, and she cried out, a sharp gasp of surprise and alarm, as she tumbled headlong into the frigid, rushing water. The shock of the cold water was immediate, stealing her breath, an icy fist clenching around her lungs. The current, stronger than it appeared, tugged at her clothes, threatening to pull her deeper into the murky depths. She thrashed for a moment, disoriented, the cold seeping into her bones. "Emily!" Anna shouted, scrambling to the bank, her voice laced with panic. Her hand shot out, reaching desperately. "Give me your hand!" Zoe, ever the impulsive one, didn't hesitate. Without a thought for the biting cold or the slippery bank, she jumped into the stream herself, the sudden splash echoing the urgency of their situation. She reached for Emily's other hand, her grip firm despite the current trying to pull them apart. Together, with a surge of combined strength, they hauled Emily, shivering violently and soaked to the bone, back onto the bank. Emily coughed, spitting out a mouthful of icy water, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Thanks, that was cold," she managed, her voice trembling. Her sisters wrapped their arms around her, a shared moment of relief and a silent understanding of the danger that seemed to follow them, even in simple accidents. Lyrael fluttered near her face, her light trembling. "That was no accident," she murmured. "The river is awake. It tried to take you." Emily frowned, too shaken to reply. Still catching their breath, a sudden frantic rustling from deep within the trees behind them drew their attention. It wasn't the gentle stir of a breeze or the casual movement of a foraging animal. This was louder, more urgent, the sounds growing more frantic by the second. Animals burst from the undergrowth, scattering in every direction, a wave of instinctual terror preceding whatever caused it. Squirrels darted up trees, chittering in high-pitched alarm. Birds exploded from the branches overhead, crying out in panicked squawks as they fled. The entire undergrowth shook violently, a living, breathing tremor moving through the forest floor. The trees ahead seemed to part, not by natural means, but as if pushed aside by an immense unseen force. And then it began to emerge. An unnatural shape, something twisted and massive, crawling out of the deepest shadows. It was less a creature and more of an affront to the natural world, a predator born from nightmare, a grotesque distortion of life itself. What was that?" Anna asked, her voice thin and reedy, her eyes wide with uncomprehending horror. Zoe's eyes widened, reflecting the monstrous silhouette taking form against the dappled light. The ground trembled beneath their feet, a deep, resonant rumble, as a dark shape fully emerged from the shadows in the very depths of the forest, directly in front of them. The girls stared, frozen for a moment, not just by terror, but by sheer horrifying disbelief. He was a monstrous figure, massive, with a long, sinuous neck that seemed to coil and uncoil with terrifying grace, supported by powerful hind legs that ended in three-toed, clawed feet. His body was dark, sleek, almost reptilian, shimmering with an oily sheen in the dim light. But it was his eyes that truly struck them, pale blue, burning with a predatory hunger that seemed to scorch the very air. His claws, long and razor-sharp, were stained with something dark and ancient. He was Vargoth, the creature they had only heard whispers of, a chilling legend among the few who dared to speak of the deeper woods. And he was walking towards them, slowly, deliberately, each heavy step shaking the earth. The initial terror, paralyzing as it was, began to give way to another emotion in the sisters, an ancient, instinctual surge of protective fury. They were the butterfly girls, guardians of the fragile, unseen balance. They had a chosen one to protect, one who had saved them in ways no one else ever could. "Get out of the town, monster, now!" Emily's voice, though still trembling from the cold and shock of her fall, found a sudden, unfamiliar strength. The air around them seemed to shimmer faintly as they instinctively focused their collective will, their dormant power stirring. But Vargoth cut them off, a deep, raspy croon that seemed to vibrate through their very bones, resonating with an ancient, sadistic amusement. "Back off, kid. This is my outlands, my home." The sound of his voice was like rocks grinding together, a malevolent hiss that promised pain. He extended one of his massive claws, digging it into the soft earth, a clear warning. Emily stepped forward, a defiant tremor in her stance. Anna and Zoe flanking her, their faces grim, their eyes blazing with a shared incandescent rage. "We are the Butterfly Girls," Emily stated, her voice echoing with an almost supernatural power, no longer weak or fragile. We protect the chosen one who saved us. When we are around, you will never hurt our friend, ever. Vargoth merely chuckled, a dry, grating sound. I make my own choices. Nobody tells Vargoth what to do. He took another step, closer now, his pale blue eyes narrowing, assessing them with chilling intelligence. The aura of relentless menace around him was palpable, a suffocating blanket of dread. The girls exchanged a quick, determined glance. Lyrel's wings flared defiantly. Then let it burn around you, beast. Together they focused their gaze on Vargoth, attempting to unleash their gift. It was a power born of empathy and connection, a mental resonance that could soothe, disorient, or even subtly influence the emotional state of another. They pushed outward, a silent wave of focused intent, aiming to flood Vargoth with a sense of dread, to make him reconsider, to turn him away. But to their horror, it had no effect at all. Their combined will, their potent gift, simply dissolved against the wall of his pure, unadulterated malevolence. The predatory hunger in those pale blue eyes remained untouched, unyielding, his gaze unwavering, almost amused by their futile effort. He was devoid of empathy, a creature of pure instinct and raw power, and their unique gifts, effective against most, were useless against a being so utterly alien to emotional complexity. With a roar that tore through the forest like a hurricane, Vargoth lunged. The world erupted into chaos. "Run!" Zoe shouted, the word a desperate, broken cry as the realization dawned on them. Their power meant nothing here. They turned and sprinted, adrenaline coursing through them, a raw, primal surge of survival instinct overriding all else. The forest immediately became a blurred maze of towering pines and tangled undergrowth as they navigated through the trees, their bare feet pounding on the damp earth. The butterflies' light flared desperately, scattering like sparks. Every rustle, every shadow seemed to intensify Vargoth's presence behind them. Anna risked a quick glance back, her breath catching in her throat, a gasp of pure terror escaping her lips. Vargoth was gaining on them, not lumbering, but moving with a terrifying serpentine grace, a nightmarish silhouette against the dappled sunlight. His long neck dipped and swayed, his powerful legs propelling him forward with incredible speed. Emily's mind went blank for a moment, replaced by pure survival instinct. There was no room for thought, only the burning need to escape. Anna risked another quick glance over her shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. The beast was closer, his pale blue eyes glinting in the gloom, his massive form devouring the distance between them. Desperation fueled their legs, sending them hurtling through the trees with a speed they didn't know they possessed. Their new powers, though useless against Vargoth's mind, had subtly enhanced their physical capabilities, pushing them beyond ordinary human limits. They thrashed through the dense undergrowth, branches tearing at their clothes and skin, their eyes frantically searching for anything they could use to their advantage, any refuge from the relentless pursuit. The heavy thud of Vargoth's footsteps pounded behind them, a terrifying rhythm of their impending doom. Finally, just as their lungs burned and their muscles screamed in protest, they spotted it. A small, dilapidated tool shed, perched precariously on a weathered wooden dock that jutted out over the murky, dark water of a small, hidden inlet. It was a flimsy structure, but in their panicked state, it looked like a fortress. They scrambled onto the dock, their bare feet slipping on the weathered, algae-covered planks, and threw themselves against the shed's weathered door. With shuddering hands, they managed to push the rusty latch into place. The click, a tiny, almost inaudible sound of false security. Emily leaned against the door, her chest heaving, listening. "He's going to get us," Zoe whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide as saucers in the dim light filtering through the cracks in the shed walls. The air inside the shed was thick with the smell of old wood, damp earth, and fear. They could still hear the heavy, rhythmic thuds as Vargoth approached, the sound echoing ominously on the hollow wooden dock. each step a hammer blow against their dwindling hope. The shed door rattled violently as he pushed against it, testing its strength. A low growl, a rumble that vibrated through the very planks beneath their feet, emanated from the other side. "Ah, how cute," a raspy voice crooned, the words dripping with a cold, sadistic amusement that sent shivers down their spines. It sounded like he was enjoying their terror. The growl intensified, followed by the sickening sound of claws raking against the weathered wood, the sound of splintering wood growing closer, louder, tearing through the thin barrier that separated them from the monster outside. The girls pressed themselves tightly against the opposite wall, their bodies rigid, their faces pale. They prepared their powers again, though hope was a flickering ember, ready to unleash whatever desperate, instinctual force they could muster, even if it was just a final, defiant stand. This wall was their only remaining barrier to their doom. Emily mentally braced herself, picturing Jake's kind, trusting face, fueling her resolve. Anna closed her eyes for a split second, taking a deep, fortifying breath. Zoe's jaw was set, her fists clenched, ready to fight. Just when it seemed like all hope was irrevocably lost, when the next raking of claws would surely tear the door from its hinges, a new sound pierced through the air. A high-pitched, piercing shriek, filled with pain and surprise, utterly unlike the monster's usual growl. The sounds of wood being torn apart suddenly stopped. The scream echoed again, this time more like a yelp, a sound not of monstrous power, but of sudden, comical agony, an indignant, surprised cry. It was then that they realized, with a mixture of disbelief, shock, and an almost overwhelming rush of relief, what had just happened. The creature, in its frantic attempt to rip through the door, had accidentally placed his left hand, his massive clawed hand, into a rusty old bear trap that lay hidden near the door, half buried in the damp leaves and mud. The trap, forgotten for decades, had sprung shut with a clangorous snap, its teeth biting deep into Vargoth's flesh. The scene outside was almost comical, a grotesque version of a Tom and Jerry skit amidst their nightmare. The hulking predator, reduced to a thrashing, yelping mess, trying to wrench his trapped limb free, his roars of pain echoing through the silent forest. The tables had turned, if only for a moment, in the most absurd and unexpected way. The girls stared at each other, their eyes wide with a shared revelation. A new sound emerged from them, not screams of terror, but a shaky, disbelieving laugh, bordering on hysteria. The weight of their fear, for a fraction of a second, lifted just enough to allow a spark of something else: opportunity. Vargoth continued to bellow outside, his monstrous cries of pain filling the air, far different from the controlled malice he had shown earlier. He thrashed violently, tearing up the dock planks, desperate to free himself. The old trap, while rusted, held firm, its steel teeth embedded deep. The air in the shed was thick with the smell of damp rot, gasoline, and their own sharp, panicked sweat. Anna, Emily, and Zoe Hashimoto stared at each other, their faces bone-white in the dim, grimy light filtering through the single cobwebbed window. The frantic adrenaline of their escape hadn't yet faded, leaving their limbs trembling and their breaths shallow. But a single fragile thread of cautious hope began to flicker in their wide eyes. They remained frozen, a triptych of terror, listening intently to the world outside. The horrific, guttural yelping that had clawed at the door just moments before was slowly dying down, replaced by frustrated, wet snorts and the unmistakable, gut-churning sound of something heavy and wounded dragging itself away through the undergrowth. A long, silent minute stretched into 2. Did we just get lucky?" Anna whispered, her voice trembling so violently she could barely form the words. As the oldest, she felt the weight of their survival like a physical burden. Luck was a currency they had long since run out of. Emily, the middle child, her mind still reeling, struggling to stitch together the absurd, horrifying logic of the last hour, nodded slowly. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead with perspiration. I think we might have. The words felt alien, a betrayal of the reality they now inhabited. Zoe, ever the pragmatist, the youngest whose boldness often outstripped her caution, was already moving. She ignored her sisters and pressed her eye to a wide crack in the shed's splintered wall, her body tensed for a blow. The forest was a mess of swirling, low-hanging fog and deep shadows. He's gone, she reported, her voice low and steady, belying the frantic pulse she could feel in her own throat. Limping, but gone. We need to get out of here, now. They didn't need to be told twice. Emily, her heart hammering against her ribs, threw her shoulder against the stubborn shed door. It burst open, with a groan of protesting rust, and she emerged like a soldier from a trench, her eyes scanning the surrounding forest, the dock, the black, sluggish water of the river. The air itself seemed to crackle with a residual tension, a psychic stain left by the thing called Vargoth. But the immediate, visceral threat had receded. For now, they scrambled off the weather-beaten dock, their shoes slipping on the slimy wood, and stumbled back onto the main path. Their pace was a frantic, disjointed mixture of all-out running and cautious, terrified reconnaissance, their heads whipping back and forth at every sound. "Where do we go?" Anna asked, her voice laced with a fresh wave of panic as they paused behind a thick pine. She wiped a smear of dirt from her cheek, her hand shaking. He could be anywhere. He could be circling back. Emily paused, her brow furrowed in intense thought. The butterflies hovered nearby, their lights soft and pulsing, tired but alive. Lirel landed on Emily's shoulder, her glow flickering weakly. "He'll heal, and he'll come again, but you made him fear the light." Emily touched her gently. "You saved me." "We save each other," Lirel replied softly. "That's what the light does." The leader's mantle, usually worn by Anna, felt heavy on her shoulders, but she shouldered it. Jake was out here somewhere. Her gentle, loyal Jake, who saw the world in patterns and kindness, lost in a woods that held a monster. "We need to get back to the house, but not the way we came," she said, her voice gaining conviction. "He'll be expecting that. He's cunning. We need to circle, stay close to the river, use the sound of the water to cover our noise." Their retreat became a harrowing dance between stealth and desperation. They moved like ghosts, flitting from tree to tree, their bodies low to the ground. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot, sent jolts of pure terror through them, freezing them in place until the silence swallowed the sound again. They clung to the riverbank, using the dense foliage of willow and thorny brush as cover. The fog, which had begun to grudgingly dissipate under a weak sun earlier, was now rolling back in with a vengeance, a thick pearlescent shroud that clung to the trees and reduced the world to a disorienting, eerie haze. It muffled sound and distorted distance, turning familiar landmarks into sinister, looming shapes. "I don't like this," Zoe said, her voice barely a whisper, her hand closing around a sharp-edged rock she'd picked up. "The fog. It's not natural. It's like he's hiding in it, using it." Emily knew she was right. The fog felt sentient, a cold, damp cloak wielded by Vargoth to conceal his movements. It was part of him, an extension of his relentless menace. Lirel fluttered down beside Emily again, her light dim but steady, a calm blue glow in the washed-out dawn. "He meant it," she said softly. "Vargoth's hatred burns deeper than any wound you've given him. You've only awakened the part of him that remembers what he once was." Emily frowned, wiping a streak of mud from her cheek. What he once was? Before the butterfly could answer, the other two joined. Seraphine perched on Anna's shoulder, and Noelle danced above Zoe's head. "The monster you saw tonight wasn't born from hunger," Seraphine said gravely. "He was made, forged from a sin far older than you. And now," Noelle added, her tone quieter than before, "he hunts not just for blood, but for what you sisters are rescuing." The sisters exchanged uneasy glances. Zoe scanned the swirling mists, her senses stretched to their breaking point, expecting a pair of pale blue eyes to materialize from the gray at any second. They had been moving for what felt like an eternity, when they rounded a wide bend in the river and saw it. A small, rickety footbridge, spanning the water, its handrails broken and dangling. It led to a narrow, overgrown path that disappeared into the deeper, darker north woods. "That's our way," Emily said, pointing, a flicker of relief warming her chilled insides. "If we can get across, we can cut through the north woods. It'll take longer, but it's less exposed. It's safer." They approached the bridge with the caution of soldiers approaching a potential minefield. The structure was ancient, the wood soft and rotting in places. Emily took the lead, testing each plank with her weight before committing. The bridge groaned and swayed alarmingly under their combined weight. The fog seemed to press in on them here, thick and suffocating. Halfway across, Zoe stopped dead, her hand snapping out to grip Emily's arm with bruising force. Her face was a mask of pure dread. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes wide, staring into the impenetrable gray wall on the other side. Emily strained her ears, but all she could hear was the creaking of the unstable bridge beneath them, and the gentle, deceptive gurgle of the river below. "Hear what?" "That sound." Zoe's breath hitched, like something dragging through the leaves in the woods over there. Anna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes darting nervously towards the unseen trees on the far bank. "He's there. Oh God, Emily, he's there. I know it." A cold knot of fear tightened in Emily's stomach. She didn't want to believe it, didn't want to accept that their gambit had failed, that he had outthought them. But Zoe's instincts, her raw, animal perception, were rarely wrong. They were trapped, exposed, halfway across a death trap of a bridge, with a wounded, intelligent predator lying in wait for them in the fog. "We have to keep moving," Emily said, her voice firm, a steeliness she didn't feel coating the tremor in her heart. Solene's wings shimmered faintly in agreement. "Time is cruel, but so is hope. Both can blind you if you follow them without light." Lyral turned toward the river, her tone suddenly urgent. "You must go. The light will fade soon, and when night comes again, he will rise stronger." The girls nodded. "It's our only choice. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just get across. Run on my mark," Emily said. They pushed forward, their pace quickening from a cautious creep to a frantic scramble. The bridge swayed violently, protesting their flight. With every step, Emily expected the wood to splinter and give way, plunging them into the cold, dark water below. As their feet finally hit the solid, muddy ground of the far bank, a low, gut-wrenching growl erupted from the fog not 20 feet away, followed by the violent, unmistakable sound of snapping branches. "Run!" Anna screamed, her voice shredding with pure, unadulterated terror. They bolted into the north woods, a desperate, blind flight. The trees became a blur of dark trunks and grasping branches, whipping past them in a dizzying rush. The fog was even thicker here, a cold, wet blanket that reduced visibility to mere feet. They stumbled blindly through the thorny undergrowth, their lungs burning with the effort to draw breath, their legs aching and leaden. Brambles tore at their clothes and skin, leaving thin red lines of blood on their arms. "We need to find somewhere to hide," Emily gasped, her voice ragged, the words tasting of copper. "Somewhere he can't get to us. A place to make a stand." But there was nothing. Only trees and fog and the terrifying sound of their own panicked flight. Their hope was dwindling, a guttering candle in a storm. Just when Emily's legs threatened to buckle, when the sound of heavy, limping footsteps behind them seemed to grow louder, they stumbled into a small, unexpected clearing. And in the center stood their salvation. It was a massive, ancient oak tree, its trunk so wide the three of them together could not have encircled it. Its bark was gnarled and twisted into patterns that looked like agonized faces, and its branches reached towards the sky like skeletal fingers. And at its base, a large, dark hollow gaped, a black mouth in the heart of the tree. "Up there," Zoe said, her voice hoarse, pointing. "We can climb inside." It was a long shot, a last desperate gamble. But it was their only chance. They scrambled up the rough bark, helping each other, their hands slipping, their muscles screaming in protest. The hollow was deep and surprisingly spacious, smelling of damp earth and decay, but large enough for all three of them to squeeze into its dark, cramped embrace. They huddled together in the absolute darkness, a single trembling organism of fear. Emily could feel Anna's frantic heartbeat against her back, could hear Zoe's hitched, controlled breathing. They listened, their ears straining to filter the sounds of the forest. For a moment, there was nothing but the dense silence of the fog. Then, it came. The heavy, deliberate thud of a footfall. Then another. A slow, dragging step. The footsteps were uneven, marked by the injury they had somehow managed to inflict. But they were powerful, purposeful. Vargoth was hunting them. He was close. The footsteps entered the clearing. They could hear him then. Not just his steps, but his breathing. A ragged, wet sound that spoke of pain and a deep, abiding rage. He stopped. They could picture him, his sleek, dark form turning slowly, those pale blue eyes scanning the fog, the trees, the leaves. They heard him sniffing the air, a long, drawing inhalation, as if he could taste their fear on the damp air. The girls squeezed their eyes shut, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. They prayed to gods they didn't believe in, made promises they knew they couldn't keep. Time lost all meaning, stretching into a single, unbearable moment of suspended terror. Then, his voice cut through the silence. It was a rasp, a chilling whisper that seemed to slide through the cracks in the ancient wood and penetrate the very marrow of their bones. They stopped breathing altogether. Emily's hand found Zoe's and squeezed, a silent message. Be still. Be silent. They waited for the splintering of wood, for a clawed hand to reach into their sanctuary and drag them out into the light. But the attack didn't come. Instead, a new sound echoed through the forest, distant at first, then swelling in volume. It was the mournful, haunting howl of a wolf. Another answered it, and then another, until the air was filled with a primal chorus, a symphony of the wild that seemed to vibrate through the tree they hid in. They heard Vargoth snarl, a sound of pure fury and frustration. His footsteps shifted. There was a moment of tense silence, and then his voice came again. Not a whisper now, but a raw, furious shout that echoed through the trees. Now, leave me alone. I'm burning this whole town down. The heavy, limping footsteps began again, not towards the tree, but away, retreating quickly into the swallowing fog. The chorus of wolves continued, their cries now sounding less like a threat and more like a warning, an ancient boundary being enforced. The sounds of Vargoth's passage faded, until the only thing left was the haunting howls and the thick, oppressive silence of the forest. The girls remained hidden in the tree hollow for what felt like hours, their fear slowly giving way to a crushing, bone-deep exhaustion. They didn't speak. They just listened, waiting for the trick, for the sound of his return. As the first feeble rays of dawn began to bleed through the fog, turning the world a milky gray, they cautiously, agonizingly slowly, emerged from their hiding place. The clearing was empty. The forest was silent, the only sound, the gentle drip of water from the leaves, and the soft, shaky breaths of the animals. Vargoth was gone. The wolves were silent. But they knew, with a chilling certainty that settled in their souls like a frost, that he would be back. This wasn't over. The shed, the bridge, the tree, these were just skirmishes. This was just the beginning. The hunt had only just begun. The fog still clung to the forest floor, a constant, breathing reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the trees. It was a darkness that had now seeped into their hearts, a cold, slick oil that they knew would never truly leave them. The echoes of that night, the snarls, the dragging footsteps, The chilling rasp of his voice would forever haunt their dreams, a chilling symphony of fear and survival. And as they finally, silently began to pick their way back towards home, their bodies bruised and their spirits shaken, they each understood the new terrible truth. This was no longer just a search for their lost friend Jake. It was a war for their very lives, and the woods themselves had chosen a side.